this is Meet the Candidate. This morning we have Sandra McKinney in District 2.
Correct.
And she is the incumbent running to get reelected. Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you give us a little background about yourself?
Sure,
I
I'd be
appreciate
happy
it.
to.
Good.
I'm a retired minister, having served Unity Christ Center in Eau Claire for 13 years. I came originally to Eau Claire in 1992, having lived in the northern part of Wisconsin for 14 years, but originally from Iowa.
Okay.
Was asked in my last year of ministry to consider public service, which was the Eau Claire City Council. I don't know if you know the history of that one.
No, I don't.
I remember that phone call and saying, really? But it was at a time when there was probably even more controversy about the Confluence Project,
Okay.
which has materialized to being quite a wonderful addition to the community. And so they were looking for someone who would support that project.
Okay.
That campaign had history because it had to go to a recount. It was the first one in Eau Claire history, and I did lose that by 7 votes. So that's that's a hard experience to go through, but also a great learning experience. And so the next year when they asked me about county board, having had that experience of campaigning and learning there was no opponent at that time, I said, I could do that. So that was in 2016, so I've served 2 terms,
Okay.
2-year terms.
Okay. Great. What makes you want to go for reelection?
You know, I really think this position takes several terms to really embrace and learn everything that the county does and about. So I think I'm really educated
Okay.
and experienced from those 2 terms. And that my work has really begun. This past year, I worked in collaboration with the city council representative whose area overlaps mine. And so together we helped create a neighborhood association, and I really think that the future of Eau Claire is strong neighborhood associations.
One of the things that I was always for incumbents, it's always because of being involved in it, you know that there's seems to be a lot more to it than a one-item thing. Tell me about, if reelected, what are the major things that you want to push for to say this is the kind of change?
Well, first, I'd like to share the mission statement.
Okay,
I always
that'd be
look
great.
to the county's mission statement in making decisions of how I'm going to vote. And it's very short: to provide qualitative, innovative, cost-effective services that safeguard and enhance the well-being of residents and resources. So for me, the residents and the resources, those are really 2 things we need to look at.
Okay.
And every time we're making a vote. I'm involved in 3 committees: Department of Human Services,
Okay.
Judiciary Committee, and ADRC, which is Aging Disability Resource Center.
Okay.
And so my focus is on the items that come before those 3 committees. I chose, though, well, they ask you what's your interest, so I marked all 3 of those, not realizing I would be appointed to all 3. But I do enjoy the work on each of those. My history in my lifetime involves working with addiction issues.
Okay.
And so that serves me both in Department of Human Services and Judiciary. I really want to be a voice that speaks out about ageism, and that we're never too old to make a difference.
Yeah, that's true.
And that I get to address on ADRC. In fact, I just wrote an article for their newsletter in February about, as a person who's, I think, on the other side of the age.
Well, I think we both are.
I can really see when that wisdom and experience that we've gathered throughout our years isn't utilized to its fullest. So I think this kind of service
Okay.
can address that.
When you look at the things that you talked about with the things that you're involved with, how do you come to making a decision when it seems like there's some restrictions on how much you can raise or lower or do any of those things for dollars for
Right.
services? What are the things that you see as the most important when making those kinds of decisions? You know?
Well, we're seeing that, we've had that experience, especially this year on Department of Human Services, because you have mandated services that the state and federal government says you will provide, and yet not allowing you to increase the revenues
Okay.
in the tax levies that you're able to create. So that is a very difficult challenge for that board. I remember 4 years ago in my first meetings on that board, asking about what are we doing for preventive services, because this will be a continual cycle
Yeah.
that repeats itself year after year if we're not looking at prevention. And in my 4 years, I'm seeing this department really moving towards addressing some issues around prevention, so that in generations ahead, we've stopped this cycle.
In all of the decisions you make, and sometimes I'm sure because you represent a large contingency, how do you bring that message to them to say, you know, what things you have to look at to say, you know, we've got to support this, or, you know, there's changes we have to make. How do you get that across to your constituents?
Well, I'm involved in a number of nonprofit organizations
Okay.
in Eau Claire. I think our voices are needed in many resources. Joan is an example of one of those. And addressing social justice issues in the community. I write occasionally articles for the newspaper and for different organizations like the ADRC. I have a Facebook page just for my county board experience, and sharing on that page, and then participating in that neighborhood association that came up for the Upper West Side, because that's included in my district. And so meeting people that way, and then the old standard knock on the doors.
Knock on the doors, yeah.
Which is involved in campaigning.
So when you look at what has put together the neighborhood thing, is that kind of one of those things that you would call kind of a town meeting type of arrangement?
Yeah, we brought all of the neighborhood associations together, and recently, for the first time, some new ones have really organized recently, and I think we're looking at possibly at least twice a year, if not quarterly, for that. And that is an opportunity for people, citizens, to have their voice heard, which I think is really important.
What kind of advice would you give to people that want to participate in public service, either at the county, the city, or school board areas? What kind of a experience that you've gone through would you suggest for somebody who wants to get involved in this? What's some of their first steps to do?
And I do think it's really important for all voices to be heard. I know that there's research that's showing that women have to be asked to serve. They don't step forward on their own. Hopefully that's going to change as we include younger generations. We're fortunate on both city and county in Eau Claire to have diversity. And I think that's so important, so that you have a voice that represents all groups. I think that everyone has a responsibility to educate themselves and there's many ways to do that.
Mhm.
There's a lot of news publications, public TV.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Which I know are a big educational component of informing people.
Mhm.
And so I just think everyone has a personal responsibility to know what's going on in their community. And I just heard this morning on a news cycle, that it's really local government where we can make a difference. It's not state or national. It's got to start at local.
Yeah.
And I really think Eau Claire is a model for that. I think we've done a
Mhm.
good job with that.
How many times do you feel that your abilities to be able to push things forward are more difficult in certain situations? I mean, are there different topics that become more difficult for pushing the agenda for change?
Yeah, I think the ones where revenues are involved are probably the hardest.
Yeah.
I know the vehicle registration, probably received the most emails for that one, of any other issue that's come before us. And when you really hear the need for the county roads
Mm-hmm.
and all of the things that are linked to that, you know, they rate county roads.
Okay.
If you can have a 10 rating on your county roads, you have access to more revenue.
Okay.
And we were at a 5, hoping to raise it to a 6. And so that vehicle registration fee was going to go towards the improvement of those county roads. So when you really understand
Mm-hmm.
all the details to get where you need to get with a vote, even though the majority of your constituents don't agree with it,
Mm-hmm.
you really have to vote on the side of the revenues.
Are there things that you see that places in town can help with that education of the public? I know that that's part of our mantra
Right.
here, is to educate. At the same time, I guess I'm wondering, what are, sitting on the county board as a supervisor, what do you feel would be a good avenue for more education of our community? Because there are a lot of issues coming up.
Right, there are, and I think it's really, it's going to take multiple ways of reaching out
Mhm.
to people. And all of those I've already described.
Mhm.
And maybe through the neighborhood associations, because
Mhm.
those are getting good attendance, at least in our district.
Okay.
And social media,
Yeah.
even though sometimes we like to hate it.
It's a love-hate relationship, right?
It has improved a way of connecting
Yeah.
with people that wasn't there in the past.
I guess as we go through life, we find that they can put different names on it, but it used to be the grassroots,
Right,
get
yes.
down there. I think that is in our best interest to start to push those kinds of agendas that help people come together, and if so, how often?
Right.
What are some of the major things that you see need to be brought now? Not,
Major issues now.
Mhm.
Well, Jonah's work, and I've been involved in that since its formation 13 years ago,
Okay,
which brings faith communities together.
okay,
And through that model, you're reaching a lot of people in every congregation to help spread the word. So that would be another way to communicate
okay.
with people.
How much transparency is enough transparency?
I don't think you can be transparent.
I'm glad to hear that, but
I think that's huge, yeah. And I know the county board right now is in our spring trainings, is looking at transparency, and that our county chair talks about transparency all the time.
Okay,
I think it's very important.
yeah. If there's a couple things that you can just say to your constituents that how voting for you will help that continuation of what you have been doing for them.
Yeah, you always ask yourself, well, why do I want to do this? There's a lot of meetings to attend.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to be unique in that I like meetings.
Okay.
I like the collaborative efforts
Okay.
that I see that we can help create, especially the collaboration with city representatives and how that's really growing. I think that's really important. I think the experience of having 2 terms, and while I probably would agree with term limits at some point,
Okay.
I do think there's value in using that experience that's gained in those first 2 terms and moving that forward. I think because of coming from a background of ministry, that I believe I did bring something unique to the county board. It's almost an energy
Yeah.
that I think is really needed in government.
And how do you spread that energy amongst your other supervisors?
Well, relationship building. I really believe in the one-on-one and really getting to know someone and where is their passion, what do they care about, what makes them want to get out of bed in the morning, and that if we can work from that, we will be energized and will be an asset to our community.
Okay. And what's your plug or your push to get people to vote?
I like to believe I'm a voice for all voices and that we all do better when everyone does better. You know, I'm in a neighborhood that the district I represent is probably lower income. It's small bungalows that were probably built in the 30s and 40s.
Oh, wow.
So elder population and people just starting
Okay.
and some rentals. And so having had some of my own experiences around financial concerns and aging, I think I can speak from experience
Okay.
in those issues, and I think that makes a difference.
Okay. Any other things that you'd like to bring up?
Well, I do have background in having been sober 45 years,
Okay.
and I know that's an asset into my work, especially in judiciary
Oh, absolutely.
and Department of Human Services, and how the addiction issue impacts families and communities. I was able to work in the 1970s in a program for drunk driving. It was a pilot project in the state of Illinois, and it was about offering either treatment, inpatient, outpatient, or classes to people picked up for drinking and driving. And I can remember at that time, the police and the judges didn't even want to talk to us. And it was the same time that the MAD organization, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, came up. So I can look back now and say, whoa, maybe the work we did back then was part of creating an improvement and some solutions. Because I think today we've really seen improvement in the drinking and driving issue. So I'd always encourage everyone, you might not see the results in your lifetime. I'm fortunate to have seen that in my lifetime and feel really good about the work we did back then.
When I stop and look at the things that you're talking about and the experiences myself, as I've seen others have, is that in starting a project, it's always tough to keep trying to push people to recognize it. But at some point in time, all that hard work that you did has paid off. How do we instill that in the current situations that we're in, that even the smallest of things can make a difference? And how would you identify that for somebody?
And again, I'll go back to the work of Jonah, which is about one-on-one relationships, and the more we know our neighbor, you know, Jonah stands for joining our neighbor
Yeah.
is advancing hope, and the more we build those one-on-one relationships, we then can come together as a community to really look at what are issues that people in this community are addressing and living with.
Okay.
Um,
Great. I just wanted to I think that I'd like to say that it's been really quite the experience to find out more about each and every one of the candidates, incumbent or not, or running against an incumbent. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is the enjoyment of finding out that no matter what seat you sit in, we're all humans.
Right,
you know,
right.
and I think that sometimes that's can be left out. But last parting words.
Oh, I'm just grateful for this opportunity to
Okay.
meet with you and to share my message, and would ask for your vote on April 7th if you're in District 2.
Yes, and then we'd like to thank Sandra McKinney, our incumbent from District 2. This has been very enlightening, and I think that if we can tell everybody, let's get out and vote your conscience and what you feel is right.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate
Good
it.
job.